You're listening to the Fooled by the Root podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is your host, Heidi Marble. I am so excited to welcome author and adopted person, Megan Culhane Galbraith. She wrote the book, The Guild of the Infant Saviour. This book, Megan, oh my gosh, I could not put it down. I was on an airplane and the stewardess walked by. I'm like, don't bother me with your peanuts. I'm busy.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
So I want to say welcome. Thank you so much for being here, Megan.
Thank you for having me. It's quite an honor.
Well, before we get on with the interview, I'd really love to read the bio on the back of your book.
Sure.
So shortly before Roe v. Wade legalized abortion, adoptee Megan Culhane Galbraith was born in a Catholic charity hospital in New York City to a teenage resident of the Guild of the Infant Saviour, a home for unwed mothers. Decades later, on the eve of becoming a mother herself, she would travel to the former Guild site, to her birth mother's home in Scotland, and to Cornell University, where she discovered the startling history of its domestic economics program. There, from 1919 to 1969, co-eds applied scientific principles to the domesticity as they collectively mothered a rotating cast of babies awaiting adoption. The babies shared the last name Domicon and provided the inspiration for Galbraith's art project, The Dollhouse. Her book, The Guild of the Infant Saviour, is a dizzyingly inventive hybrid memoir of one adoptee's quest for her past. She pairs narrative with images from the Dollhouse, weaving a personal and cultural history of adoption as it relates to guilt, shame, grief, identity, and memory itself. Ultimately, she connects her experiences to those generations of adoptees, to the larger stories America tells about sex, motherhood, and to the shadows those stories cast on all of us. Megan is a writer, a visual artist. Her work was a notable mention in Best American Essays 2017 and has been published in the Tupelo Quarterly, Redivider, Catapult, Hope Art, Long Reads, and Hotel America, among others. She is Associate Director of the Bennington Writing Seminars and the founding director of the Governor's Institutes of Vermont Young Writers Institute. Also notably Best American in 2017 and 2021. This is very impressive, Megan. Oh my goodness. Well, first and foremost, I know that it's your birthday today. And adoptees have so many mixed feelings about their birthdays, but I just wanted to say I'm so glad you were born. And I actually, from one writer to another, I wrote you a poem, and I would love to read it to you. It's my gift to you. And then we'll just start chatting away.
All right, unless I'm crying.
Well, I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Oh, no.
So the title of your poem, Megan, is Your Birth is the Day. You are worthy of the stars you rest under, the breeze that rocks your worried bones. Your arrival is a miracle, your survival the same. Strength pulses in the rise and fall of your days. You were meant to be born, to have fire-blown wishes, the cake's tender slice, to claim your space in the world, in spite of, despite of, because of. Your soul striated with beauty, known by the womb of the ocean, bone of the branches, sun-drenched days, your words held by paper, born into primal severance, carried by primal power. Your birth is the day you became a daughter of the world.
Okay, I'm crying. That is so amazing. Thank you so much.
Well, Megan, our last conversation meant so much to me. Just I felt instantly connected to you.
Oh
and I
God.
think, adopted people, I want us to still be able to celebrate our birthdays and honor our existence, even though that was also one of the most difficult days. So, yeah. Anyway.
Thank you so much. That's just what a gift. I told you, I told you I wanted to do this on my birthday, when we were picking times, because it's just so special to be able to talk to other adoptees who get it. And I just felt like this would be a gift I could give myself, when, so many people take their birthdays off. I wish I could this time. Work is a little bit stressful right now, but, I'm really glad to be here with you.
I'm so glad you are too.
So much. I want that poem. I'm putting it on my wall in my studio.
Oh, that makes me so happy.
So nice.
Oh, Megan. Well, let me tell you, your words have also been a gift to me. And I would just like to dive right into this amazing book of yours. First of all, what a journey. So much originality. If you have not read her book, please do yourselves a favor and read it. I would love to start with the really interesting element of the dollhouse. And if it's okay with you, Megan, I would like to read this little blurb in your prologue, and then I'd love for you to respond.
Sure.
So you say, children play to control the world. When I was a child, I wanted to control my world because as an adoptee, I felt I had no control. I created these small universes populated by all sorts of figures, friends to have tea with, monsters to defeat, the new miniature realms to explore. It was empowering to make all of the decisions. So I built dioramas and imagined myself into another life. It didn't matter that the stage was tiny. These were worlds into which I could disappear. Yeah, Megan. So all of the dolls and everything, it really is so interesting to me. So can you start with that, why that means so much to you and how that came about?
Yeah. I mean, I stumbled into this whole idea of playing with these dolls. And it wasn't intended to ever be an art project. I didn't consider myself a visual artist until I went to my first artist residency and brought the dollhouse. It was a way that I just played out things. It was just, it was a fun kind of feminist, snarky art project that started. It was just like, I'm going to make these things and put them on Facebook and people will laugh at them. Right. And, I brought the dollhouse and all the dolls to this artist residency. And when I would get stuck on the page, I was trying to write this book or put an early iteration of this book together. And when I would get stuck on the page, which was a lot, I would just, move my chair and sort of play in the dollhouse and just take funny pictures and do whatever. And part of being at this residency was it was my first artist residency. And so I became frustrated because I couldn't write, the way you think you have to produce something, right? It's like, I need to produce, and all these people around me, another writer and these three amazing visual artists are all seemingly in their studios doing the work. And here I am, like I say in the book, it felt like sitting in my own poopy diaper trying to write this really hard stuff. It was like it was very traumatic trying to write these things, trying to figure out how I felt. So I decided to go to the library, which I love. I love libraries. And it happened to be, we were near Cornell. And so I looked up some books. I was like, let me look up some books that I'm going to, maybe they'll help me with my research. And I stumbled on the Domicon baby program. And so went to the archives and came back with a camera full of images of those Domicon babies. And then when I was stuck on the page, I would restage the archival photos in the dollhouse. And that became an art project in itself. I started putting these photos up on my, I had a big bulletin board on my studio wall. And then I began thinking, well, I'm going to pair these together and how can I stitch them together? And it literally, it just sort of formed out of that. And then I realized I'm doing the same tasks that these mothers were being asked to do in the practice house. I'm stitching together like I had, you're probably not old enough, but I remember as a kid having those sewing kind of cards.
Oh, I'm old enough. I'm old enough, Megan.
As I would, and this was another way of me, like when I was stuck on the page, I would be like, okay, let's just sew these together. What do I have in my studio? Because I use found objects. And I would open a drawer to the studio or next to my bed, and there was a old, sewing kit somebody had left. So I'm just like, well, I'm just going to use this and sew these pieces of paper together. And as I strung them up on the wall, my friends who were legitimate visual artists at the time, I was like, I didn't know what I was doing. My friend Samira came in and she was like, what's this? What's going on here? This is interesting. And I was like, no, what you're doing is interesting. But she was like, no, this is legitimate, Megan. This is some really good visual art. She's like, and you've only been doing it for a hot minute, so just keep going with it. And I think that essay, that Hold Me Like a Baby essay that you see in the book with those different staged photographs, really became the basis for the photos, and the photos themselves became a gallery show in an art gallery before they were ever an essay. And after I wrote the art statement about the project, I used that as the basis for the essay, because I realized, and I think it was from playing it out in the Dollhouse, I realized how much those Domicon babies we had such parallel, experiences. It was like this weird quantum thing across time and space. I felt for these babies, just like I think as adoptees, we feel for each other's experience, because it's one that we have, we don't talk about much, and until we have spaces like, your podcast to do it. So that's when I realized, gosh, I could do this for the book and curate photos from my baby book and restage them in the Dollhouse. And it might be just as powerful as it was for those babies,
Yeah, I found the images that you staged, they affected me more than real photography. There was something about it. It hit a different place in my soul. Just, I don't know, like a deeper ache in the bone.
Yeah.
Just very, very, very impactful. And I think because we mentioned Domicon, I honestly, I'm not proud to say this, but I had never heard of this until I read your book. And it was on that same airplane. And literally, I wanted to stand up and scream, does anyone else know about this? This is so horrible. And that just underlines the shame and secrecy. Yeah. Can you explain to our audience what it is, like Mothercraft and Domicon at this very highly regarded university? Can you take us to this moment in time that is... Ugh.
Yeah, it's such an interesting program because, I focused on the babies, which I don't feel like there's been a lot written about the babies. But in Cornell, and then in 1919, they began this scientific degree program for women. It was very feminist and forward thinking, and it was going to apply the principles of science to everyday life, mothercraft, like vacuuming and making meals and budgeting for the house, and also raising a baby, because, that's what only women could do. So using what they did was Cornell had contracts with various orphanages and foundling homes to take in, babies who were in those homes. They could be given back at any time if they didn't work out based on the contract. But essentially, to me, it looks like, they're like sort of raising, it was like, veal, they're sort of fatting and raising these babies who then are adopted out of the program to parents. And they were highly sought after babies because the parents were sort of sold or perceived them, because they were raised, quote unquote, with scientific principles, to be some sort of super children, which, there's no such thing as that, right? And there's no such thing as like how to raise a baby scientifically. It's like, so these babies were taken, first it was bad enough that they were in orphanages or foundling homes for whatever reasons. And, in the early 1900s, it's still not, society still isn't set up for single mothers to have the levels of support that they need. So just imagine back then, you can't work and go to school, or, work and have a child, especially if you're single and unwed. So these babies would be in these homes. Sometimes, I uncovered, which is, as you would expect, mothers who wanted to come back and get their babies. This one particular mother kept saying, I just want to see him. Can I just see him to make sure he's okay? And, they said no, he's going to a better family. And so this happened with, I think there were hundreds of babies through this program, right? And it ran through the late 60s. And so women would get their degree. They all lived in what were called practice apartments, and the babies were mothered by, like up to 6 different practice mothers. So feasibly, a baby could be put down and be picked up after its nap by a completely different person. And the science that we know now about attachment disorder and, all those things. I mean, can you imagine growing up and being like, who am I attached to? First of all, no one, because they probably laid there in the foundling home or the orphanage, and then to have 6 different maternal figures picking you up, and then to be adopted into another family. So you have, ideally 7, 8 mothers in the first year of your life. And that, after understanding the science of attachment, I want to go back and find those babies as adults. And, and the hard thing is, adoption is so much about erasure. We have an identity before we're adopted, then we have a new identity when we're adopted. And in this case, they had 3, or more. And all their records were destroyed, like they were adopted. And then I don't think many of those babies even knew they were in the DomaCon program, as I understand it. Yeah.
That's just such a tough thing to think about, that type of history existing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for explaining that and for laying it out so beautifully in your book, recreating those scenes. Whew, Megan, that's
so interesting.
That's intense. It's so interesting. Well, I'd like to circle back to more specifics on your own experience being an adopted person. What would you like to tell us about what it was like for you growing up? And just, whatever you'd like to share.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a loving family. I had horseback riding lessons and ballet lessons, and I played the violin, and I went to a good school, and I went to by the grace of God, I got into a good college. But, as an adult looking back on my childhood, there was a constant thing with me. I was very much a people pleaser, very much in my own head, to the point where, it's no wonder I read and write books. I loved books when I was a kid, and I would just sit on the couch, lay on the couch and read for hours, till the point my mom would be like, don't you want to go outside? Don't you think you should go outside? And then when I would go outside, I would do these solitary things. Like I'd go into the woods, or I remember sitting at the edge of our driveway. We lived on a cul-de-sac. So I'd sit on the edge of our lawn, and I would even make little worlds out there. I would pull the lawn back a little. I would make little tiny beds for ants. It's just I would use a leaf for their bed thing, or I would go down into the woods and just there and daydream and just be in my own head. And so I had friends, this is not to say I had friends, and I tried to do, I did things. I was, an active child, but very solitary. And I don't know if my parents would say I was solitary, but I was very much in my head for much of my growing up. And then as I got older, and only until I had began having children myself, did I really start to reflect on adoption, what it meant. Having my boys was the impetus for starting to unpack all that, which I think you hear from a lot of adoptees. Having their kids is oh my God, but also going to doctor's appointments and being, and they would say fill out your medical information. And at one point I was like, wait a sec, none of this applies to me. So I would be like, I don't know don't know what to put here. And I would start to say, well, I'm adopted, so I don't know what my medical history is. And no one ever really gave that much thought, except, except later in life when you start, it's becoming more active, that people are hearing this, and I think that's so good about having so many adoptee voices speaking up and saying, this is a thing, and I'm so grateful. I'm grateful for having written this book. When I was writing it, I thought I was the only one feeling any of this stuff, which was really scary. I didn't know there were adoptee communities. I didn't know there were podcasts for adoptees. And then when I published the book and I began to find these communities, and I was like, oh my gosh. And people write to me with the nicest, they're just like, you put words to my feelings, to how I've been feeling. And to me, that is so powerful, because I didn't have anybody who was showing me that these were actually my feelings. In fact, I'm sorry, I'm gassing on, aren't I? In fact, no, I was so scared about, I was so scared that I somehow got it wrong. Like the research that I did, I'd done all this research and I'm like, this feels weird to me. And here's why, as an adoptee, but also even my feelings. I was putting these down on paper and I'm like, I think I'm the only one having these. And so then right before my book came out, Gabrielle Glazer's book, American Baby, came out. And I remember buying it immediately, tearing through it, just crying, and then writing to her and saying, I didn't know her. I think I found her on Twitter and I was like, my book's coming out. I said, and you just validated the research that I did, the conclusions I made from this research. We were doing this research in tandem. And also just hearing Margaret's story, and I think his name is David, right? It just their feelings. I was like, oh my God, I'm not alone and I'm not crazy. And from there we formed a really amazing friendship. And I'm so grateful to her book, and for that kind of friendship too. And I was so glad. It was such a hard thing to read, but at the same time I was like, oh my God, I'm not alone. And when people write to me about my book, that's a lot of what they say too. Like I don't feel alone because of this. And I didn't know, I didn't know that adoptees were at a greater risk for suicide. I just knew that was something I'd considered, and so just to know these things doesn't take away any of the pain of any of it happening, right? But at least like people are there and empathizing and going through it. So
yeah, Megan, for sure. And I think the books and being able to talk in these sort of situations, being able to share, we can heal together in community and feel less alone in our process. And I really appreciate you sharing that. One thing in your book too that I absolutely love is when you decided to seek out your original mom, Ursula. And I absolutely love the detail that you give. I love how you set this up. I would have never thought about it. But when I found my birth mom, I remember picking out the clothes, but I loved how you just had every detail down to what you were wearing, what she was wearing, what you brought, what she brought. And it was such, I don't know, it was just a great humorous break, but also very serious, because that is such a pivotal moment in an adopted person's life. And I would just love for you to explain to us a little bit about Ursula and how you came up with the courage to meet her and how that changed your life or your identity.
Yeah. No, I remember the train trip like it was yesterday. I was so nervous. I had literally explosive diarrhea on the Amtrak. And I'm like, this is don't recommend that at all. I was so nervous. And so all those things that I was wearing were comfort. They were there to bring me comfort. It was my little pajama shirt, my old jeans, and all of that was so I would be comfortable. Um, and as an adoptee, at least my experience was, I was adopted through Catholic Charities, and I didn't know I had access to search in any form. And the whole search through Catholic Charities, and it was Bridgeport, Connecticut, was kind of two parts. You get your non-identifying information, and you can tell me if this is how you went through it too, but the non-identifying information, which is paperwork the birth mother would have filled out, but it might not be the birth mother. It could be, this is the, caseworker was saying, it could be her mother filled it out and put all sorts of lies in there, or it could be no information. It could be just, two things to not identify anybody. But when I got that information, it was like in her hand, because I recognized the handwriting immediately. And I was like, this is my handwriting. And that was such a visceral reaction. I was like, oh my God. And she was pretty comprehensive in what she filled out. It was like, here are my aspirations, here's whatever. She didn't have too much about my birth father, but it looked like she tried, based on what she'd known. And, and then I think the pivotal point for me to go to the second stage, which is like the actual search and finding piece, because there are two parts. You can stop at non-identifying and never go any further, or you can do the search. And so I just, spent weeks like, what if she doesn't want to be found? You're thinking through every scenario, because it can be another abandonment. And people talk about reunion, or they glamorize reunion, but it's many times not any glamorous thing. You're meeting a person who is your biology, but you have no idea if they want you there, if they're going to embrace you, if it's just going to be like, hi, I'm meeting you, and it's going to be secret and we're not telling anybody. It's all these levels of disappointment and really another tragedy. But she was, so I moved to search because she had updated medical information about 10 years before on, I guess her grandmother had been given DES, and it had repercussions in, women, and it could be like a DES daughter or DES granddaughter. And so I thought, she cares enough to update this information, so maybe she wants to be found, right? And so I contacted Catholic Charities, and I was like, yeah, let's do this. And in Connecticut, they're obligated to do like a 10-hour search. Whoops, sorry. They're obligated to do a 10-hour search for your birth mother by Connecticut law. So the caseworker said, they called me back very quickly, and they're like, well, this was the quickest search we've ever done. She's like, we called her last place of employment, and they were like, oh yeah, she has a daughter out there somewhere. She's always told us, here's her number in Scotland. And so, and so then it was like the days of airmail. So we were airmailing letters back and forth, and then we talked on the phone, and her mother had just died, and she's like, I'm going to come to New York and spend the little amount of money that I have, from my mother. And, she got a hotel room, and we met, and she's like, I want to be near the Guild of the Infant Saviour, so I can walk you around the neighborhood. And, it was pretty powerful. And so to go there, and, at one point it was really, really cute. I mean, we were kind of, we're drinking and carrying on. And, I'm like, I had just had my first son, so I'm like pumping breast milk and dumping it. And, we're going out to dinner, and she's walking me around the neighborhood, and, we're poking in shops. Right. And I was like, oh, I need a new pair of shoes, because the ones I had were my favorite shoes, but like blown out on the side. And I was like, I need a new pair of shoes. So we go shopping for shoes, and she buys them for me. And I was like, I think I laughed, and I was like, wow, these are like size 9. They're going to look really weird dangling off your rear view mirror. I was like, baby's first shoes.
That's right. I love it.
Baby's first shoes.
Oh my gosh. I can just picture you guys in New York City doing this. I can see it all in my mind. Amazing story.
In my head, I'd had on my way home on the train, I started decompressing and thinking about the weekend, and suddenly it hit me kind of halfway home that that wasn't just like, that's not just a one-time thing. You don't just have the reunion and then it's done. It's like, oh my God, I have to have a relationship now. Like, oh, what does that mean? How is this going to work? And so we just sort of began, and it worked for a while and it worked for a long time. And then I started asking her all sorts of questions and writing about it. And, at some point, I think, I don't know about you, but and maybe this is just me, but I have an insatiable amount of questions, that you feel like nobody can really answer. But when you get answers, I think this book was a lot about kind of memory as a coping mechanism, which is something we all do. It's like we make memories that we can live with, and sometimes they gloss over things and whatnot. And so we were both doing that. But in me, I think pushing her on a lot of details and everything, I really was touching some very sore spots, of course, and I was also in therapy and trying to work through a lot of my sore spots. Looking at adoption and writing about it like this is like to immediately go in and re-traumatize yourself again.
It's so true. It's so true, Megan. It is really, it's all just very painful. But I think it's progressive pain, I would like to say, because you're finding out answers to questions, even though they're insatiable. I understand that.
Yeah.
Because really, how can we truly ever make sense of all of this?
I know.
I don't know if there's an end answer that will ever satisfy that. So,
right. I know.
Yeah.
I feel the same way. At some point, I know I have, when I started working on like my inner child work, and I realized I don't want that baby running my life, anymore. And so how do you soothe yourself? Because, I guess these are things real people know how to do, but I was like, oh, I didn't understand. Like, I didn't understand this was a real issue, and how much it affected relationships. And until you know and you can work on it, it's like, okay, I'm working on myself, and then I'll radiate outward. But
I'm so glad you said that, Megan, because one of the things in your book as well that I'd love to talk to you about, you were talking about cages and the key to a cage. And if it's okay, can I read a little bit more?
Yeah. This is very flattering. You read my work.
Well, I'm obsessed with books and writings, and you are very good at this.
Oh, thank you.
So I love this. This is actually the chapter, The Girl, the Garden, and the Key. And this is the first part of that. There once was a young woman who lived in the cages of her own making. Her name was False Self. The cages were beautiful. She built them with first prints, and they loved each other for a long and happy time. The cages felt safe for a while, but as she grew and she changed, she despaired at how she locked her true self away. She put her heart under glass behind a walled garden, deep inside herself. She'd go there sometimes to look at her heart and feel free. The door to the garden could have easily been opened with a key, but she kept the key hidden so well that she couldn't even find it.
God, I need to cry at my own work. It sounds great when you're reading it. Actually, I was like,
it is great, Megan. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. And it is great. Oh, girl. Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that, because, wow, relationships are so hard. And especially when you're an adopted person and attaching to anything, and all of the confusion that goes on in our mind.
Yeah.
But you were able to actually get the cage to the key and walk through and find your true self. That's what I want to believe has happened. Can you talk about how you decided to write that, and what revelations you've had about relationship?
I had a good friend who also an amazing writer, Susan Merrill. And she read my manuscript and she was like, here are things that I think are missing. And one of them is you need a chapter about, or an essay about your marriage, like what happened, your divorce and that. And so, as good writer friends are, she's like, you have 30 days, give me something in 30 days, like she's not my teacher. She's just like, this is missing. I see what this can do. This is missing. And so I began to write this essay, and as you can tell from the book, there's a lot of stuff I just don't write straight on, everything's like from a lyric perspective or from a side view or something. And so I started writing this sort of linear narrative about what had happened. And it was just so like, nobody would want to read this. It was like a diary entries. It was boring. It was like, this isn't saying what it's supposed to say. So I got like 2 weeks away from the deadline and I had all this stuff. And suddenly I was like, wait a second. Women are sold this idea that marriage is a fairy tale, and what if I make this a fairy tale? And I had been learning about false self and true self, which are psychological principles, right? And when you apply them to adoption, especially, it's like when you're living as your false self, you're sort of in the fog. That's, the term, in the fog, and you're a people pleaser and you're doing things that there's an interior life. Like, I don't know about you, but we have these rich interior lives that we don't express for whatever reason. It's not someone else's fault or whatever, but there's like, it stems from abandonment. I realized mine stemmed from abandonment. It's like, but if I show myself like this, they're going to go away. And then I realized in my marriage, I'm like, I wasn't showing myself and there was a reason I wasn't. And I needed to find myself again. And it just, there's nothing that was bad about necessarily anything that he did, but I realized I could not be my true self, in that place, and there's a quote by, I think it's Rumi, that says, why do you stay in your cage when the door is wide open? Why do you stay in that prison when the door is wide open? And not to say, I mean, some people will be like, yeah, marriage is a prison. Right? People will say
I think
that.
there's a few people I know
Right?
that say that.
Right. But I mean, I didn't think that I didn't feel that way. But at the same time, I was definitely not, living from a point of being my true self. And I needed to go. And I remember saying basically, in this particular relationship, I was like, you don't deserve to be with somebody who is not 100% there for you. And, I don't want to be with someone who knows that I'm not 100, we both deserve better in that way. And so, in leaving, it's like, I didn't leave. There was no abuse. There was no cheating. There was nothing that is like, oh, well, that's the reason she left. He had a gambling problem, or she cheated on her, or she cheated on him, or something, or I'm leaving for another man. I'm like, I'm not playing any of those cliches. I didn't leave. I left for myself, which was in many ways harder, when there's no outward anything to blame something on. It's just, for me, it was the most difficult thing because I knew I was hurting someone who was a really good person. But, I was hurting myself more by staying. So, in choosing myself, it was just this, I just got to the point I just had to, get out. And so, but that was the whole idea of making it a fairy tale, is like this blossoming. It's like, here we had the fairy tale blossoming, but then also turning that trope on its ear and being like, but the real fairy tale is when you can fulfill yourself for yourself, right? Especially as a woman.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. Like, we're not given I just don't feel like, there's so much like, oh, you should have stayed. Did you try hard enough? And you get that message from people. And I did get that message from, my birth mother was like, surely you didn't try hard enough. You're probably just in menopause and this is just, hysterical. And and other people were like, are you sure you tried hard enough? I'm like,
Please, no more comments. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Megan, thank you for sharing something so personal. And I think this is a good moment to pivot toward all of the people that are in pain and worthiness. So what I heard when you were saying that is I am worthy of my true self, not my false self. And that's a very brave step. So what encouragement can you give? Because I know we struggle daily with worthiness. Yep. I think it's on a sliding scale, depending on what's happening.
Yep.
So what can you speak to about that? And the fact that you were able to actually complete a step, not just think about it, but you made an active step toward your true self.
Yeah. I thought about it for a long, long time because I probably should have gone much earlier. I was feeling it, but not listening to my body. I think there's been many things in my life where my I think I say in the book too, my body always has broken first. There's always been something that is like telling me or showing me like, this isn't right. You gotta, get out. And, so it began with like listening to that. And, I was not fully self-realized at all. I just, when I left, I was just like, there's something I just know that this has to happen. And then I began the real work of like finding a therapist who actually works with adoptees, and working with her on a number of things and putting words to things that, I met her and she was pivotal in a lot of me writing this book, because just knowing what attachment disorder is, or knowing like there is something called a false self, or knowing, and she gave me these kind of tools to learn how to heal, like the idea of an inner child, how to soothe my inner child, just things like, holding myself or considering myself worthy. I had to go through this years long process of, I think I even made an art project out of it once. It was like, I am going to write, she said somewhere on the internet, I remember seeing, write a love letter to yourself. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And it was so hard because I didn't feel worthy of my own love. So here I'm trying to write this like love letter to myself, and it was kicked my ass. And I did it. And then I thought, you know what? I want to make this sort of an art project. And so I put it out there and asked for people to write me love letters to themselves, but send them to me, and I would send them mine, and it would be sort of this. And this was right as I was moved into my new apartment and was going through like, do I really want a divorce? What, so it was this sort of crisis of self, and it was something I needed to do. But then, writing, that's one thing, but then living it every day, like you said, it's like, I don't know about you, but I have to continually sort of get up and do these power poses. Like I am worthy of taking up space here. And I am worthy of, someone flying across the country to be with me. I'm worthy of, like great, great love. And here's what that means to me. And I'm not going to settle for, some of the stuff that I've settled for in the past. And that means too, like I might be alone, like what if I don't find that? That's the part of like leaving a marriage that I was like, I'm not leaving for somebody else. I'm leaving to potentially be, alone for the rest of my life, which is also kind of stupid because I'm not alone. I have so many great friends, so many great people in my life. It's full. It's, but the one piece, I think the one piece I miss is the romantic partnership, a true romantic partnership. And even that has changed. My idea of that has changed from the fairy tale narrative we're sold in our 20s. It's like marriage and this and that and kids. And it's changed to, I want a person I'm I have a, mind, body, soul connection with, and but most importantly, who's going to like grow with me and do the work with me and have done this themselves, understands, that it's relationships are hard work, but like to want to do the work together is like the ultimate in intimacy. Right. And that's like, as people or as adoptees and I've struggled with intimacy. Like, what really is it? How do I do it? Am I doing it correctly? It's like, and so in finding out, I like to say, my love language, right? We talk about love languages is touch and quality time. Two of the things I probably didn't get as a infant in foster care for the first 6 months of my life. So as much as I want to be held, sometimes I'm like, oh, do you ever find yourself, somebody puts their arm around you and you're like, oh, what's going on here?
Oh, definitely. It's a defense mechanism. And people don't understand it, because other times you're like, just hold me.
I know. I realized this in grad school, when I was in grad school, and I never had girlfriends who were those like in high school or anything that we'd sit around and braid each other's hair and like lie on each other and play, and I never knew that was something you could have. And then in grad school, that's what we all did. We like laid on each other and touched each other's hair. And I remember being so uncomfortable with that at first. I was like, wait, what's this do? Where is this coming from? I'm not sure. And then I was like, this is what we people do. This is what friends do. And I was like, oh, and then you kind of relax into the trust of that. And, and that was an eye opener for me too. I'm like, wow, I'm really touchy for not being touched and for being touched. It was really weird.
And it's so nice that you can identify your love languages and know what they are. And I think that is probably an ultimate challenge for an adopted person.
Yeah.
Is defining what all of that looks like, Megan.
It is defining feelings in general. Even in therapy now, I'm like, I told a new therapist, I'm like, I'm going to have a hard time defining feelings, just so you know, because it's hard to put words to that.
It is. It certainly is. And Megan, we're wrapping up our last few minutes of our interview. And one of the things you said to me on our intro call that I absolutely loved is you said, when I asked you how you would like to end the interview, you said, I want adoptees to know that I see you. And I just feel it'd be really special for you to speak from the deepest part of your heart to all these amazing humans that are listening, and they're just so open to receive the love and the encouragement you have to give them.
Well, I want to say to people, because it's something I need to say to myself, that you're worthy of receiving good things. Like, receiving those things is hard, but once you are open to, receiving and accepting that you are worthy of receiving those things, that's when my growth really started to happen. And that's also when, I think we're givers anyway, but part of giving is learning how that is reciprocated, how it comes back to you. And I think I even put in the book, like, I see you, because I think being seen, truly seen, is the highest form of intimacy, right? And I'm just really grateful for the adoptee community who's read my book and actually seen themselves in my words, or seen me because they read my book. Like, you can't know someone just from a book, but I feel very known and seen thanks to this community. And it makes me feel held, to have strangers like you across the country. I'm just like, I can't wait to get to Portland, or, to like, we are gonna, we're gonna meet.
We are, Megan. I can't wait for that moment. I feel so connected to you, and I do see you, and I feel like I know you through your words and your honesty. And I just appreciate you making the effort to spend time on your birthday with me.
It is
what a
gift.
Privilege.
It's a gift to me to do this, honestly. So I really appreciate you.
Oh,
And
thank you, Megan.
yeah, and what you're doing with these podcasts is just so helpful and healing to so many people, and it's been a joy. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan.